Setting for me is a really, really important part of any of my books, as it is for Tiger Daughter. So for me, setting is almost a character in itself. I like the reader to be in the shoes of the characters in the novel and to walk the streets and to eat the food and smell the smells and be in the same sort of atmosphere, whether it's one of fear or anger or joy or happiness, as the character is feeling. So for me, I think what I wanted to do with Tiger Daughter was really play with that sense of home as a place of safety and refuge. For a lot of children in the country, especially migrant and refugee children, home isn't necessarily always a safe space, and neither is the public space. And so I think when the reader reads Tiger Daughter, they get that sense of, home potentially is a place of danger or a place of foreboding. And so place is very much central to Tiger Daughter. And it also foregrounds the kinds of places I guess I was living in when I was growing up as a young migrant child in this country. So places that aren't necessarily reflected in the mainstream, that maybe are, more down at heel or less like the places that we see on television or in the media. I think it's vital that every reader sees themselves in the books that they read. I think for me as a child growing up, I came to the country in the 1970s, which is like dinosaur days, like the early days. And when I was growing up, a lot of the children's books I was reading simply didn't reflect people like me in them. We weren't on television unless it was a negative story about boat people, lumping all Asians into the same category. And we weren't, we weren't sort of represented in political life, sporting life, artistic life. So, from that lack of seeing me, I guess that absence, I moved pretty early on into reading really inappropriate sci-fi and fantasy novels. So for me, those novels seemed much more expansive because it didn't even matter if you were human. You didn't have to look a particular way. You didn't have to be a particular gender to still have adventures and agency. Um, so I think it's really important, and that's why I wrote Tiger Daughter in a sense, because I was furious that my own child, 30 years later at the school that I went to, was still getting the same books on her tailored book list that I was getting at the same age, which simply didn't reflect my lived experience or her lived experience. And so I think it's really vital to actually read books outside your comfort zone because you will be forced to walk in another person's shoes and understand the way they look at the world or experience the world from their perspective. And even if that's momentary, and it just happens for a few minutes while you're picking up the book and getting into it, it's really important to just get outside your privilege and understand that not everybody's conditions of life are the same as yours. I think all books actually, are good models for, either positive behaviors that we should sort of pick up in our own lives or negative behaviors that we should possibly not replicate. So I think every book, no matter what the genre is, no matter whether it's escapist or it's sort of a heavy, complex nonfiction book, all of them are forcing you to look at the world in a different way, possibly through the eyes of the writer, possibly through the eyes of the character, but all books that you read challenge you to move outside your comfort zone in a sense, or they kind of tell you what your comfort zone boundaries are and whether or not you need to test them. So I think it's really vital actually that you don't just read in a particular genre. So if all you enjoy reading are manga cartoons, that's fantastic, but that is not going to expand you as a reader and as a writer. If writing is something that you want to get into, you actually need to read really widely and read across the spectrum and read all genres so that you can play with words, play with concepts, play with images, play with the world that we live in and really, break it apart, take it off the map and really kind of critique things that bother you about the world. So for me, like reading really widely helps me inform my writing style, but it also, I think it just enriches the way I look at things and also tells me a lot. It like puts me in check because sometimes when I'm dealing with people who are outside my culture or outside, I guess, my professional capacity, it helps me to actually pitch things to people in a way that they will understand or, engage with. So I think it's really, really important to read as widely as you can because it will help you sort of deal with, all manner of people from all walks of life and help you to like communicate your message in a clearer, more understandable and more empathetic way.